Thing is quietly shifting in America, and millions of people are starting to notice, and they're not happy about it. You're working harder than ever, but your groceries cost more, your rent is higher, your insurance went up, your subscriptions add up to more than cable ever did, and your paycheck barely keeping pace. And the strangest part is, nobody can point to the exact moment it started. It just crept in, slowly, quietly, until one day you looked at your life and thought, wait, I'm doing everything right, so why does this keep getting harder? Here's what's actually going on. Because rising costs, disappearing ownership, AI replacing jobs, and technology tracking more than most people realize, these aren't four separate problems. They're four parts of the same problem. And once you see the full picture, you'll understand exactly why so many Americans are starting to feel like something has gone seriously wrong. Let's start where most people feel it first. Think about a woman named Sandra, medical records coordinator, mid-40s, gets paid on Friday, and by Sunday evening she's already run the numbers for the month. Not because she's anxious by nature, because she's learned that if she doesn't, something slips. No luxuries, used car, packed lunch most days, no real vacation in 3 years. But every month, the math gets slightly harder to balance. Not dramatically, not in any way visible from the outside, just consistently. Month after month. The gap between what comes in and what goes out keeps narrowing, and she can't point to a single thing that caused it. Now you might say, prices are up, everyone knows that. And you'd be right. But America has been through inflation before. Prices rise, people adjust, life moves on. So why does this time feel genuinely different? Because it's not one price that went up. It's all of them, at the same time, with no sign of letting up. And here's exactly what that looks like in real life. Your electric bill is about $30 higher than it was 2 years ago. Not a crisis. Groceries cost an extra $40 or $50 a month. Annoying, but manageable. Car insurance ticked up. Your combined subscriptions now cost roughly what cable used to. Rent increased a few percent at renewal. Every single one of those on its own is survivable. But they don't take turns. They all hit, every month, with no end in sight. And what that creates isn't a financial crisis in the traditional sense. It's something subtler and harder to fix. Something that most people feel but struggle to put into words. Psychologists call it decision fatigue. Should we turn the heat down at night? Switch to the store brand on this? Put off the car repair another month? Skip the trip again this year? None of those decisions is particularly hard. But when you're making dozens of them every single month, indefinitely, just to hold your position, not to get ahead, just to stay exactly where you already are, the weight of that accumulates into something real. It quietly redirects your mental energy away from the future and toward the present. The bandwidth that used to go toward goals, toward planning, toward imagining what comes next, gets used up entirely on managing right now. People stop thinking about where they're going, they get busy just not losing what they already have. And when that becomes the permanent state, that's when the cost of living story stops being about money. It starts being about whether the rules still work. For most of the 20th century, a simple and fairly reliable premise shaped how Americans approached their working lives. Not blind optimism. People always knew life had setbacks, but the underlying logic held. Consistent effort, over time, moved you forward. A raise meant breathing room. Paying down debt opened up options. Staying committed to something built towards something. Progress was incremental, but it was directional. Now here's a moment that captures exactly what has shifted. A man gets a 3% raise at work. That's actually solid in the current environment. His first response isn't relief. It's calculation. That raise is going to cover the rent increase, or the jump in his insurance premium, or close the gap between what groceries cost last spring and what they cost right now. It's gone before it even clears his bank account. The raise was real. The work that earned it was real. But the sense of moving forward that it was supposed to create, that part is becoming harder and harder to feel. And this is the moment the economic story quietly becomes a psychological one. Because here's something most economic coverage doesn't talk about. Economies don't just run on transactions. They run on belief. People save because they believe it'll matter later. They accept lower pay today because they believe the trajectory is pointing upward. They sacrifice now because they trust that tomorrow will be worth it. All of that behavior, the productive behavior that actually keeps an economy healthy, depends on one underlying assumption holding steady: that what you put in still roughly determines what you get back. When that assumption starts to feel shaky, everything downstream changes. Not overnight, not loudly, but measurably and in ways that are hard to reverse. Now let's talk about something most people haven't fully registered yet, because it's been happening gradually and the shift has been dressed up to look like progress. It's about ownership, or more precisely, whether you actually own what you think you own. For decades, the transaction was clean and simple. You paid. You owned it. End of story. Buy software. It lives on your computer for years. Buy a car. It's yours. Buy a television. Plug it in. It works. The moment money changed hands, control transferred from the seller to the buyer completely. That was the foundation of the consumer economy as most people understood it. But then companies started asking a different question. Not, how do we build something worth buying? But, how do we keep generating revenue after the sale is already done? How do we maintain a financial relationship with a customer who's already paid and walked out of the store? The answer they landed on has quietly reshaped the entire way products and services work. Subscriptions, at first, made genuine sense. Software needed continuous updates. Streaming services added new content weekly. Cloud infrastructure had to stay running around the clock. In those cases, recurring payments reflected real ongoing value being delivered. But then the model didn't stay where it started. Cars began shipping with hardware already physically installed. Heated seats, advanced safety systems, premium audio. But some of those features only activated if the owner paid a separate monthly fee. Home security cameras started storing footage exclusively through paid cloud plans. Smart locks and thermostats began requiring manufacturer accounts to function properly. Some new apartment buildings replaced physical keys entirely with app-based entry systems managed by third-party software companies. Each of these has a reasonable explanation. Updates keep systems secure. Cloud storage keeps data accessible. Digital management reduces operational costs. But here's the question those explanations don't answer. After you've paid for something, what do you actually own? The car, or the right to access certain features of the car? The apartment, or permission to enter through a platform that controls the door? The device, or a license to use the ecosystem that makes it work? For decades, ownership meant control. Increasingly, those two things are no longer the same. Here's the consequence worth sitting with. In the old model, you buy something. The seller is done with you. Control transfers completely. The relationship ends at the register. In the new model, that relationship never quite ends. The company stays present in the background, as a permanent condition of your ability to use what you've already paid for: their servers, their terms of service, their pricing decisions next year. They follow you home. From a business perspective, this is completely rational. Recurring revenue is more predictable, more stable, and more attractive to investors than one-time sales. There's no hidden agenda here. It's just a model. But the effect on the person on the other side of that transaction is real, regardless of the intent behind it. The old question was simple: can I afford to buy this? The new question, the one quietly gaining ground, is after I've paid for it, does it actually belong to me? When ownership becomes access, what changes isn't just how companies make money. What changes is where control lives. Now here's where the technology piece enters. And this is where everything in this video starts connecting in a way most people haven't thought all the way through. A man named Thomas is driving to a job site early one morning, both hands on the wheel, eyes forward. Then the center console chimes softly and a message appears on the screen. Eyes forward. Distraction detected. He wasn't distracted. His hands hadn't moved and his eyes hadn't left the road. But his car was watching him. and it registered something about where his gaze had briefly drifted before he'd even consciously noticed it himself. He drives the rest of the way in silence, sitting with one question he can't shake. How does it know that? That kind of moment is becoming increasingly ordinary, not dramatic, not alarming in any single instance, just quietly present in the background of more and more everyday situations. And the answer to Thomas's question tells you something important about how the modern world actually works now. Traffic systems log license plates automatically. Customer service calls are analyzed for tone and content, not just recorded. Smart speakers process voice patterns on an ongoing basis. Fitness trackers follow sleep cycles, resting heart rate, and movement throughout the day. In many American cities, a person can travel several miles without ever leaving a camera's frame. Social media platforms build detailed behavioral profiles based not just on what you click, but on how long you pause before scrolling past something. Each of these has a stated purpose. Some are genuinely useful. Some make real things safer or more convenient. That part is true. But here's what changes when you stop evaluating each one in isolation. A single data point tells you almost nothing. Someone was near a pharmacy on a Tuesday afternoon. Completely meaningless on its own. But combine that with purchasing patterns, location history, search behavior, demographic information, and social signals collected over months, and something qualitatively different emerges. Not just a record of what someone did. A model that can predict what they're likely to do next. That's where artificial intelligence actually begins, not in a distant server farm running mysterious calculations. It starts here, with the accumulation of signals from millions of ordinary interactions collected by the systems that now run quietly through daily life. Without that data, AI cannot learn. It cannot identify patterns. It cannot generate predictions that are worth anything. The cameras, the sensors, the apps, the devices, they're not the intelligence. They're the nervous system that feeds it. And this creates a genuine paradox at the center of modern technology that almost nobody talks about directly. These systems were built to give people more control over their lives, better navigation, smarter recommendations, faster access to what they need. And in many real ways, they deliver on that promise. But to get better at helping you, they need to understand you more deeply. And to understand you more deeply, they need more of your data. More data means more observation. And more observation means the relationship between you and the technology is no longer quite as one-directional as it first appeared. People aren't alarmed by a single camera on a street corner. What's harder to articulate, but increasingly felt, is something larger. That they exist inside a system that is becoming exceptionally good at knowing them. Their patterns, their habits, their preferences, their vulnerabilities, in ways they can't fully see, audit, or step outside of. Not because any one piece of it is dangerous in isolation, but because together, the picture it builds is very detailed and very permanent. If this video is helping you see the bigger picture, what part of this have you noticed most in your own life? Drop it in the comments. And then there's what's happening to work, which may be the quietest shift of all, precisely because it doesn't look like a shift from the outside. A mid-sized logistics company invested this year in an AI operations platform. It handles route optimization, inventory forecasting, scheduling, and a large portion of customer communications. The company is performing well. Revenue is up. No layoffs are planned or expected. But this year, when 2 coordinators retired and a customer service rep left for another position, none of those 3 roles were refilled. The work is still getting done. The business is running smoothly. The remaining team has found it manageable, even with fewer people. 3 positions simply never opened. No announcement, no press release, no single moment anyone could point to, just doors that were never unlocked. And this is exactly why the standard way people talk about AI and employment misses the more important question. Everyone asks, how many jobs will automation eliminate? But that may actually be the smaller question. The larger one is this: what happens to the value of human labor when companies can consistently generate the same output with fewer people? Because here's what it looks like from the inside. People don't necessarily get fired. Wages don't necessarily drop overnight. The employee who shows up Monday morning still has their job. But the leverage they once had, the bargaining power that comes from being genuinely needed, quietly erodes. When a company can afford to take longer filling a role, be more selective, and resist wage pressure more easily, none of that generates a news story. None of it shows up in a headline. But the cumulative effect across enough industries and enough years reshapes the balance of power between workers and the organizations that employ them. Here's the deeper irony that makes this particularly difficult to address. AI is being developed specifically to increase productivity, and it delivers on that. Output goes up, efficiency improves, the gains are real and measurable. But increased productivity doesn't automatically flow back to the people doing the work. It flows to whoever owns and controls the system that generated it. For most of the 20th century, workers with valuable skills had genuine leverage. If a company needed something specific that was hard to find, the people who had it could negotiate wages, conditions, career advancement. The scarcity of certain human capabilities created real economic power for the individuals who possessed them. That was the logic behind every career path, behind every degree, behind the whole idea of getting better at something over time. Now consider what changes when technology can perform or assist with a growing portion of those same skills. The scarcity shifts, and with it, quietly, systematically, so does the leverage. History suggests that major technological transitions eventually create new kinds of work. That's probably true this time as well. The concern isn't the long-term destination. The concern is who carries the weight of the transition while it's actually happening. Now step back for a moment, because this is where the individual pieces become a single coherent picture. Rising costs outpacing wages. Ownership gradually replaced by access. Technology observing and modeling behavior at a scale most people haven't fully registered. AI quietly compressing the demand for human labor. These aren't four unrelated trends running in parallel. They share a structural pattern. And when you see it clearly, the direction is specific. In every case, control is consolidating. Slowly, across multiple parts of life. All at once. More of your income is committed before you even decide how to spend it. Less real discretionary control over your own money. More of what you've purchased is governed by ongoing terms the seller controls. The transaction never fully transfers ownership to you. More of your behavior is being modeled by systems you interact with but don't govern. Someone else is building an understanding of your life that you can't fully audit. More of the leverage workers once had is being absorbed by the systems that organizations own. The employment relationship keeps shifting in the same direction. No single one of these is absolute. Each has limits, counterweights, and genuine uncertainty about how far it goes. But as a direction, across all of them simultaneously, the picture is consistent. The ordinary individual's sense of agency is under quiet, sustained pressure from multiple directions at once. And this is why the frustration so many people feel right now is so hard to explain in a single conversation. It isn't really the grocery bill. One expensive run to the store is manageable. What's harder to absorb is the grocery bill, and the rent increase, and the subscription that renewed without warning, and the job market that feels less forgiving, and the retirement that feels further away, and a technology landscape that feels less transparent. All of it arriving together, all of it feeding the same underlying sense that something is off. And that feeling follows a recognizable sequence worth naming clearly. It starts with exhaustion, not physical, cognitive, the constant calculations, the micro-decisions, the ongoing adjustments that now go into simply maintaining a life that used to require less active management. Exhaustion accumulates into worry, not just about this month, about the direction things are heading. What does this look like in 5 years? What does it mean for the people coming after us? Worry held long enough without any real relief becomes something quieter and harder to name, a slow weakening of faith, not in any specific person or institution, in the underlying premise itself, that discipline and patience still lead somewhere, that the rules people built their lives around still hold. And when that faith weakens, When people begin to feel that their choices don't meaningfully alter what's happening to them, something else eventually surfaces. From the outside, it tends to look like anger, but it isn't quite that. What it actually is, more precisely, is grief. The grief of losing a version of the future that felt earned, that felt like a fair return on what had been invested. 3 moments that capture this. A woman in her early 30s has been saving toward a down payment for 4 years. Disciplined and consistent. Never missed a month. 6 months ago, she sat down and ran the real numbers and found that she's actually further from that goal today than when she started. Despite 4 years of uninterrupted effort, she hasn't stopped saving. But something in the way she looks at the future has quietly shifted. A couple in their late 50s thought this stage of life would feel different. Not wealthy, not retired yet, but settled. Instead, they're tracking every expense with the same attention they gave their 30s. They recalculate the retirement timeline every time insurance costs change. The question they can't stop sitting with isn't whether retirement is possible. It's when they stopped being able to plan for it with any real confidence. A young father drives past a neighborhood he always assumed he'd eventually live in. He still believes he'll get there. He just no longer knows when or if. 3 people, 3 completely different stages of life. One shared emotional state, not despair, something quieter and in some ways harder to address. Doubt. And here's why that matters far beyond any individual story. Economies don't run on money alone. They run on expectation. People invest, start businesses, take night classes, accept lower pay today because they believe the trajectory is pointing upward. All of it depends on one belief holding steady. That effort and outcome are still connected. That what you put in still shapes what you get back. When that belief is intact, people tolerate sacrifice. They take calculated risks. They build things. They make long-term plans because long-term plans feel worth making. When it starts to crack, all of that behavior changes. Not all at once, not dramatically, but measurably. People become more cautious. They defer the big decisions. They reduce their exposure to risk. Young people spend more time anxious about the future and less time actively investing in it. The invisible infrastructure underneath ambition, innovation, and social cohesion starts to quietly thin. And that slow contraction, across millions of people each making slightly more cautious choices than they would have made 5 or 10 years ago, has consequences that don't fit neatly into any single data point. So, where does all of this actually lead? Honestly, no one knows with certainty. Maybe AI generates a new wave of industries that absorbs the displacement currently underway. That's happened before. The Industrial Revolution was genuinely brutal in its transition period and genuinely transformative across the longer arc. The same pattern may hold this time. Maybe housing markets correct. They have before. Maybe the terms of the data economy become more transparent, more regulated, more genuinely negotiable for ordinary people. All of that is possible. None of it is guaranteed. And the people living through the transition right now don't have the luxury of waiting to find out how the longer arc resolves. There's a concept in psychology about what happens when people feel that their outcomes are no longer meaningfully shaped by their own choices. When effort and result become decoupled. Research consistently finds that humans can tolerate serious difficulty when they believe their actions can change what happens next. What causes the deepest and most lasting damage isn't the struggle itself. It's the feeling that struggling doesn't matter. That's a qualitatively different experience from inflation, different from any single economic variable. It's the experience of living inside a system that feels increasingly responsive to forces other than the decisions of the people inside it. And that's the real question sitting underneath everything we've covered in this video. Not whether prices will keep rising, not how quickly AI will advance, not how far data collection will eventually reach. Those are real and serious questions. But the deeper question is simpler and harder. Do people in America still believe the future is something they are building, or does it feel, more and more, like something being built around them, without them? If this changed how you see things, or confirmed something you've been feeling for a while, hitting like takes 2 seconds, and it helps more people find this. That question won't be settled in any legislation. It won't be resolved by any single company's decision or any particular election outcome. It will be answered in the quiet aggregate of how millions of ordinary people respond to it in their own lives, in whether they still feel like participants in what's coming or subjects of it. A society isn't measured only by the size of its economy or the sophistication of its technology. It's measured by how the people living inside it feel about their own future. And if more and more people feel they're working harder while moving less, owning less, controlling less, and trusting less, then the frustration building quietly beneath the surface of American life isn't a reaction to any single event. It's a response to a direction. Recognizing that direction clearly, without panic, without fatalism, but with open eyes, is where any honest conversation about what comes next has to begin. The pattern is visible now. What part of this resonated most with you? Tell me in the comments. I want to know what you're actually seeing out there.